Hello and welcome to Get Involved Referee with Des Roach and me, Lindsay Heron. And we've got a very special guest on the show for you today, Mr. Andy Walker. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Nice to speak to you guys. Looking forward to getting all your chat.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for coming on. We know that you're a very, very keen supporter of referees. You've been their biggest buddy this campaign. So without wasting any time, let's get straight into the big appointment for the weekend, Andy. Kevin Clancy gets the Old Firm game. It's going to be his fourth Glasgow derby. Firstly, is he the right man for the job, and how do you think he'll get on?
Honestly, I have got no issue with any referee who takes care of a game in Scotland. You can count me out of any club that thinks referees are against them. I think what I have seen, having been present at the presentation of VAR in England some years ago and a few months ago here in Scotland, I mean, it was sold to us as the presentation was very professional, it was very slick. Crawford Allen was there, a couple of his colleagues, and it was going to be brought in to help eradicate the clear and obvious mistakes that refs can make. All of them can make it, and that's fine. And we all bought into it. But I think the truth is, after looking at it over the last number of months, we are being forensic in our examination of incidents. And I don't know what can possibly be clear and obvious of so many incidents that are being looked at. If you're looking at it 15 or 20 times, and I don't think we're using it wisely. That would be my call on it.
Yeah, it does seem, Des, that a lot of the calls this season, like Andy says, are decisions that just wouldn't have been given, even if the referee had seen them prior to VAR.
Yeah, excuse me, I completely agree. And not to be a after-timer, we've said this for long and weary. Why bring it in mid-season? The chief executive of the SFA coming out saying, yes, there will be teething troubles. No, you don't have teething troubles. You get it right. And decisions that have been given and not given this year are quite bamboozling. The biggest one being the handball. That's the contentious issue. I think that's the Scottish FA's hidden nightmare at this minute in time. The technology works. However, it's the interpretation and the application of the people using that technology and then transferring that on to the on-field referee.
I totally agree, Des, and I just wondered whether, I'm looking at, I'm doing as many games in England as I do in Scotland, and obviously it's pretty new to the lads up here, but I'm seeing a much lower standard of the referees in Scotland since VAR has been introduced. I don't know whether there's an abdication of responsibility. I don't know whether they think, do you know what? We've got another shot at this. I don't need to make some calls. Mm-hmm. You only need to go back a couple of weeks to the Andy Considine basketball incident, the Alan Main penalty at Tannadice. These decisions from the referees and then being looked at VAR, they are beyond outrageous. It's just inconceivable that you can't come to what looks to me, please correct me if I'm wrong, it looks to me as though it's a clear and obvious error you've made. You don't need to look at it very often. Andy Considine has slapped that ball away as if he's a basketball player. Curtis Main was not fouled. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Curtis Main, he was just threw himself to the floor, didn't he, in that Tannadice situation? But that's both ends of the spectrum, Andy, isn't it? You're saying that they're too forensic on the one hand, and on the other hand, they're missing glaring errors.
For me, I obviously in my profession as a PE teacher, I think Andy Considine has just gave the best example of a spike in volleyball that you could ever see. But that negates from the obvious error of the referee on the field of play at that time, mm-hmm. and the obvious error of the VAR official at that time. Now, we're not here to criticise referees. We're here to try and support our ex-colleagues. But that is indefensible. And other ones that we've seen going earlier in the year are indefensible. So if you've made an error, put your hand up. Okay, got it wrong, move on. But the biggest thing for me is nobody has come out and spoke about these. Nobody has mentioned anything saying.
I think that's what we're hearing is, and this is what I find quite disturbing, we're hearing from, I went to the sort of, during the World Cup, with a sort of update of how VAR had gone in the opening number of weeks, maybe a first couple of months. And we were told that correct decisions had improved. They'd gone from 92 to 98%. Now, I'm happy to admit I challenged Crawford Allen on that, because I think there are some times where it's not a right decision. There's a decision made by the referee, and then they might be advised to have another look at it, and it's someone else's opinion. So many of these instances, they're just subjective. They're neither right nor wrong. It should always be down to the referee on the field of play. And I think we've lost that a little bit. What I would like to see, I would love us to follow the lead of the FIFA guidance that we saw in the World Cup. Let's remember that this is a great sport. Let's remember that the fans are the lifeblood of the game. And if we can, let's give them value for money. Let's try and keep all the players on the pitch. And I totally accept, of course, players can be really stupid, and at times yellow cards, red cards, they're necessary. But what I'm seeing over the last number of months is the threshold for a yellow card and a red card, it's far too low.
Yeah, it doesn't. You don't seem to be able to make the same type of challenges. I mean, that's incrementally get different over the years, Des, for sure. You look at footage from Andy's first period at Celtic, for example. I mean, there was some choice tackles.
Totally accept, Lindsay, I totally accept. We do not want to go back to the type of tackles that maybe I was on the end of, and maybe even at times I was guilty of myself, but they were the rules at the time. But I think if we can just, I looked at that World Cup tournament, and honestly, if you had a Scottish referee with Scottish VAR, there would have been games where there would have been multiple red cards, and that can't be right. It just can't be right. We need to, they need to think again about how we are using this tool. I totally agree with Des. The technology is there. It's working. There's no problem with the technology. I think there was one instance at Fir Park in Motherwell, when Celtic were there, and something happened. I don't know what, but
the camera was trained in the wrong spot.
We need to use it a lot better.
And I agree with you entirely. So where does that come from? For me, it can only stem from one place, and it's the education and the way that the current match officials are being told to interpret it. So it comes from the top, and that's been permeated down the way. Mm-hmm. So if you're a player and you've got an instruction from your manager, your coach, this is how I want you to play today, these are the tactics we'll set up, these are the formations that we're going to play, etc., then the buck stops with your manager. Mm-hmm. And for me, this is entirely the same. The buck stops at the top, and what the information and what the education is being fed down to the match officials and what they're expected to be applying and interpreting on the pitch. And for me, simply, it's not good enough.
There was some flannel today, Andy. I think Ian Maxwell came out and spoke to one of the news outlets. He didn't do a general press conference, that's for sure, and came out with a few platitudes about how, we had a few problems, but listen, we'll be all right, mate, and just stick with us, and we're doing our best. I mean, that's not good enough, is it?
No, it was absolute nonsense what Ian Maxwell came out with, and he didn't address the issue that pretty much every game I'm going to now, every supporter, forget the colour of your strip, every supporter is concerned about the way we're using VAR. I think we can all accept the technology is working, so it's such a mundane statement to make. Of course the technology is working, but what we really want to address and what we really want to know a bit more of, what are you, as Des has just said, what are you telling your referees? Why are we Why are we investigating and scrutinising every single detail of a possible shot pull, maybe a hand raised, some handball decisions that have been given, others that haven't? And I just seen them as being beyond outrageous. And I was all for VAR coming in. I thought it would really help us because we want to get away from these horrible errors. And at times this season, VAR has been used very well, but far too often we're not using it wisely. And I think it's a real problem for the clubs who are paying for it. And I don't know how the players are feeling. I'm not close to many of the current players, but they can't be happy with what they're on the end of.
What needs to happen in the summer, Andy, then, in your view? I mean, what does the SFA and the refereeing body have to come up with to change the dynamic here?
Well, again, I'll go back to the presentation that I saw at Stockley Park some years ago when it was introduced into England, and I went down to that. And at the time, I wanted to be on side with VAR, and I thought I reluctantly sort of bought into it. And I think if you look back to some of the instances in England, again, it was too forensic.
Yeah.
You were looking at far too many minor details and you were ruining the game. It was taking too long. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, we've got to remember the fans are the lifeblood of the game. I was at a game at Fir Park recently and the game had suddenly stopped. No one knew why inside the ground. And then the game kicked off, and about a few seconds later, we heard from the stadium announcer that there was a bar check going on. Now, obviously, that had passed.
Yeah.
And I know we've not all got big screens, but we need a lot of, how many teams? I look at a lot of teams. I look at the way they play. My God, they play at 100 miles an hour. We are in Scottish football. Most teams play at 100 miles an hour, and it just delay. I've got the option of working with Sky. I've got the option of listening to VAR, and to be absolutely clear, what I'm hearing is VAR. I'm hearing the video assistant referee. I don't hear the referee on the pitch. And one other concern that I might have, and I won't mention any names, and I won't mention the teams involved, but there was an incident where a couple of things happened in the space of a second or two. And I heard the VAR saying the easiest way out of this is if it's offside. Now, that to me is really poor language. There should be no idea that we get an easy way out. What you need to do is look at what's happening on the pitch and just apply the laws of the game. Don't look for an easy way out. That's not good enough. And I do think it has improved in England. And of course, we'll always get these subjective decisions that we're all, you'll say black and I'll say white, and that's fine. It's football. It's controversial, and we don't want to ever lose our controversy. But it has improved, and we need to try and get to a place very quickly where we can improve. And I think we only need to look back to what I said earlier. Look at the guidance that FIFA gave the referees for the World Cup. There was a very high bar. Forget yellow and red cards. There was a high bar for fouls.
Yep.
And I think the referees there took that on board, and I think it helped make the product and us watching games wherever you are in the world, it helped make it a more enjoyable competition.
And I think the most frightening thing there, now obviously you're in a privileged position where you can obviously have access to the conversation that's taking place between the VAR and the referee, but to hear that a match official has said, I think the easiest way to get out of this is given offside, that's frightening. It's absolutely, it's frightening.
It's awful. I couldn't believe what I was listening to. Now, again, I'm not going to mention any names and I'm not going to mention the game, but that type of language has it's got no place, and it gives me an indication that maybe some of the people who are operating VAR, they're not at the ground, they're not feeling the atmosphere. I think one thing we could, when you talk about in years gone by, I think if we could get to a stage where we could engage, players I'm talking about, if they could engage with the referees a bit more, and I think referees used to feel the game a bit more than they're doing now, because they've now got this safety net of VAR. It doesn't matter what I say or do. Someone will tell me I've got it right or I've got it wrong. I think the standard of the on-field refereeing has been poor, and I think what we're seeing, that example that I've given you of a VAR official saying the easiest way out of this, that can't be right.
No, absolutely not. And that tells me two things. One, the on-field referee hasn't had a feel for the game, or hasn't sensed and been able to pick up any infringement. And as you quite rightly say, he's then went for a safety net to say, can you check this for me? Can you have an opinion on it? And the VAR still doesn't want an opinion on it. So that's 3 errors in one scape. And to use the language of, right, let's just give a free kick or an offside and get on with it, that's frankly embarrassing.
It'll be interesting on Saturday, Andy, if Nick Walsh has something similar to say to Kevin Clancy.
Well, listen, I've been involved in this game long enough to know that you can debate a throw-in on the halfway line for 4 or 5 days. So I totally... The one thing we're guaranteed at Parkhead on Saturday is that there'll be someone who'll be berating the referee. There'll be someone who'll be...
There'll be more than one, Andy. There'll be more than one.
There'll be more than one. But I think I've got no problem with controversial incidents as long as they're looked at and you get I honestly believe we've got a bunch of referees who are doing their best. Again, I'll go back to what I said at the start. You can count me out of any club that thinks referees are deliberately in favour of one team or another. And they've actually got a very good tool to help them with. And I just think we need to get to a place where it's much more acceptable for everyone looking at it and saying, do you know what, I don't agree, but I can understand their point of view. I can see where he's coming from there. But the incidents we've talked about a few minutes ago, they are beyond outrageous that you can't get the right decision. This is not these handball decisions, you know, Andy Considine, the Curtis Main one, there's been others. They are beyond outrageous, and that can't be acceptable. And I agree with Des, it has to come from the very top, and we have to be better. We have to look to be better. This idea that we've gone from 92 to 98% correct, it's just not right. It's not accurate. It's quite insulting, actually.
Well, that's another thing. They should be more transparent in terms of the figures and the stats. Who's benefited from VAR? Who's least or not benefited rather from the technology? That would be a good indicator as well, wouldn't it?
Lindsay, look at what happened down in England a few weeks ago, and they've had it for a good number of years. The VAR lines were drawn incorrectly. Arsenal, I think, were denied maybe a couple of points.
Yeah.
So, the VAR's working down south as well, but you will get possibly some very high-profile, shocking decisions like that. Mm-hmm. But I've seen that action has been taken.
Yep.
I think it was Mason.
Mason? Mason. He was taken out, wasn't he? They took him away.
He's been taken off VAR. He won't be doing it again.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable to make a mistake like that when you've got everything at your disposal. You've got technical people there who are able to. It's not the referee who is drawing the lines. There are technical people operating the apparatus to draw these lines and to get them wrong. And I think think Stuart Kettlewell was entirely right to ask for clarification on a couple of decisions at the recent Motherwell Rangers game.
Yep.
It looked to the naked eye as though the lines were a bit wonky.
Yes.
And we have to be very transparent. We have to sell this as technology that's working. We have to trust the technology. I think most clubs, I think every player will buy into the fact of an offside decision. Absolutely, that is now a fact. It seems to me that it's a fact.
Yeah.
And despite the really small margin, most people will buy into that.
See, with the technology, and now all these cameras are set up in each stadium.
Mm-hmm.
They're all standardised. They're all proportioned appropriately with the lines come in. Andy, let's just take it right back. It's the interpretation and the application. The things work, okay? The computer technology works. I could put my 8-year-old son in front of a computer and he wouldn't know how to use it. Am I going to blame him or am I going to blame the computer? Well, sorry, Finn, you're too young. You can't work that. It's the same as this. These guys are trained. They're operating it. They've been up to date with it all. It's just down purely to human error and human judgment of why this isn't being applied. And it's not happening anywhere else other than Scotland. I don't hear it happening in Spain, Italy, France, Germany, wherever you want. It's only happening within Scotland. And it's something that really has to be identified.
The thing is, Andy, the technology is more enhanced in England, isn't it? I mean, for a start, they've got more cameras. They've got better equipment. Yes. You get a nice, beautiful computer graphic of every potential offside decision, which we don't get. We get a one view of it from the side of the park. It looks like someone's drawn it, got the ruler out. You know what I mean?
We'll do the Celtic Rangers game on Saturday, and we'll have 14, 15 cameras. I don't think we'll miss anything.
Yeah.
When there's a Premier League game in England, there's even more. There's in excess of 20 cameras. I think for some of the World Cup games, my goodness, there were 40 cameras. A lot of them are trained on the spectators, but
yeah.
we've certainly got enough cameras to sell a great product. I mean, let's not get into the absolute madness where we can't even get away fans into this fixture. But we do have the technology. It does work. Our interpretation and application of it has to improve. And I think, in just a very basic sense, we're being too forensic in our examination of far too many potential shot pulls, potential hands that are raised, handball decisions that just beggar belief.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to improve. And I agree with Des. It has to come from the top. There has to be a recognition from Ian Maxwell that speak to supporters in general of all the clubs in the Scottish Premiership. I don't think you'll find anyone that this has been a great introduction. This has been a real bonus to Scottish football. There have been times it has worked really well, and that's been great. But the cons of it, the numerous outrageous decisions, far too many. We have to improve.
Can you give us an insight then, Andy, to what your day is like on Derby Day? I mean, obviously it's a lunchtime start, so you're up early for a full Scottish breakfast, rather, or is it muesli for you, and then a glass of milk?
A bit of porridge in the morning.
That's my boy. That's my boy.
But no, whatever time the kick-off is, I tend to be at the ground about 3 hours beforehand. All of our guys will have put all the necessary sound, technical equipment, the cameras, all the cables. They've been laid the day before. Mm-hmm. These guys are really professional, and I turn up along with all my colleagues. So, for example, I think we've got Chris Boyd and James McFadden, Stillian Petrov in our studio with Ailey Barber. It will be me alongside Ali McCoist and Ian Crocker.
Yeah.
And it's a game that we love. I think we're all really disappointed that the club seem to be watering down the great rivalry. I mean, we're trying to sell it to the rest of the world of being one of the best fixtures, and yet we can't seem to allow any away fans in, which is really sad. But we'll go through. We'll have done some of my colleagues in the Sky office this week will have done various features on some of the players that we'll see, sure. And I really enjoy even the few hours beforehand when we're all trying to guess what the team is and how it's going to play out, and we all check our microphones, our monitors, and we've now got a VAR. We've now got a VAR volume, and some people don't like to listen to it. I know that some co-commentators don't like to hear the VAR. I do.
You've got it cranked up.
I'm always in.
You should maybe send it to Hamden.
and as well, do you know, I don't want to. I do recognise I'm in a privileged position, and I don't want to. That's why I'm not giving any names or games about that earlier. But just as an example of maybe a little bit of panic setting in from a video assistant referee, where an incident happened, and oh my God, what are we going to do here? Well, there's no problem about what you're going to do here. You're just going to apply the laws of the game and not come up with any phrase that might say the easiest way out of this.
Well, again, thinking on that, I know that obviously there's an observer at the game who's watching the referee and the assistant referees. There's actually a VAR observer in Baillieston, the Clydesdale House, I think it is. Yeah, there is a VAR observer in there, and if that was a comment that was passed, then that has to be picked up.
Sure,
that has to be picked up, because there is someone in there who's watching the quality of what those officials are doing, the ones that are not on the field, and relaying that information. So, but as you say, Andy, you're in a privileged position where you can hear it, but that still shouldn't avoid people. I don't mean being punished, but people being reminded of what their role is.
Presumably you go armed and ready to take on McCoy style, Andy, with a few pre-prepared bullets.
Well, Lindsay, you'll know as well as I do, he's the easiest company, and he loves his Scottish football too. It's great that we've got someone like him who's making such great strides with so many different employers. But what he's doing is he's selling Scottish football in the way that when I say we, us at Sky, we do a lot of games, and I know we get a bit of stick, and sometimes we don't always get it right, but we do cover every single club, and this is our showpiece occasion. I can't tell you how disappointed I am that we don't get a sizable away support. I'm actually wondering if we've seen the end of it, because there doesn't seem to be anyone in either boardroom who wants to have a sizable away support at this fixture. And having spoken to, I know when I speak to Ali on Saturday, he'll be so disappointed that you don't get
that's
that aspect of it. And I totally accept there is an ugly side to Celtic Rangers, and we don't want to encourage any of that. But as a player, I'm born and bred in Glasgow, and this was the best game I played in. I hear about everyone saying it's some of the best atmosphere. I'm talking about players, foreign players that have come and experienced this. They might have played in Barcelona against Real Madrid. They might have played in Milan derbies, and they might have played elsewhere in Europe. And they always say that the Celtic Rangers game was the best experience that they had. So we're diluting that at the weekend, which is a great pity.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous, and it's called an Old Firm rivalry. So if it's a rivalry, there's two people, there's two sides to it. Okay, we understand there's an element of any support, whether it be Celtic, Rangers, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, who maybe take things beyond what's far.
But it's not to do with that, Des.
It's not to do with that, but it's got to be that you have both sets of fans in there. They create an atmosphere. This has now gone beyond. It's now business decisions, and it's been done above the. But a Celtic Rangers game is.
The real decision is that I think the Rangers were getting fed up with Celtic fans glorying in doings at Ibrox, to be quite frank, when they were struggling up after rejoining the Premiership. Andy, I think you'll probably agree with that.
Lindsay, that's true. That's entirely true. And Celtic couldn't wait to do the same. And I think the truth is they cannot stand the sight of one another.
Yeah.
And that's a great pity, because when I played, my manager was Billy McNeil.
Yeah.
He had, I know that it was genuine. He had a great warmth and friendship with John Gregg, who I saw coming on to the pitch at Ibrox last week to give Alan McGregor his commemorative 500th game accolade. So there's always been this great rivalry, but I mean, I've got total respect for. I'll see Alan McCoist on Saturday. I will look forward to seeing him. We'll have a laugh and a joke, and then we'll get down to business. I'm sure we'll be involved in controversial calls that we might disagree on, but when the game is said and done, win, lose or draw, I'll still have that same level of respect for him, for what he did for Rangers, for just being an opponent in that game, and I'm sure it's reciprocated.
Andy, we've hardly had a flashpoint in the derby so far this season. Are we tempting fate? We might get a bundle of them on Saturday.
There's always the chance of people losing it. My goodness, look at what happened at the women's game. Just what was that, a week or two ago, when one of the coaching staff just completely lost it. And on occasion, you do get individuals where, maybe the occasion's too much for them, and they lose control and they can't keep their emotions in check. And I always go back to that when I see Frank McAvenny. I mean, the last thing that Billy McNeil said to him on that October day when he ended up in court with Terry Butcher and Chris Woods and Graham Roberts. Ridiculous. The last thing Billy said to him was, "Frank, don't get involved." And he did get involved, and he was sent off. And he gave me a row for not being near enough to him to help out. And I said,
"Where were the honours, Andy?"
Billy told us not to get involved. I'm just doing what I'm told.
Could have been 5 in court then, Andy.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears, wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
That's the one.
I know. But I remember, you're talking about the away support. I mean, I think when you scored at Ibrox in the centenary season, the Celtic fans had half of the main stand and the old enclosure at Ibrox, as well as the Broomloan stand.
I can remember being in a bit of the main stand, obviously towards the Celtic end, and then there was the Broomloan, and then there was a tiny section of the Govan stand, and now the Sandy Jardine stand as it is now. There was a tiny section of Celtic supporters in there, and there was the enclosure. If you remember, the enclosure in front of the main stand, that too was full of Celtic supporters. Yeah. So,
and then the Rangers fans used to get the whole of the way end at Celtic, didn't they? The old Celtic.
Right. And I think that might have been around 15,000, 16,000 that held. So
incredible.
Yeah, different days, but surely we are big enough to accept that it is a fabulous rivalry. It is a great sell to the rest of the world, and if we could just get a sizable away support, I think it would add to the spectacle. But we'll wait and see on that.
Completely agree.
Just to wrap up then, on Saturday, Nick Walsh is going to be VAR. Des, is he the best man for that job, given that you think he's our number one referee?
I think that Nick should be the man in the middle.
Right.
Now, I know he's already done a couple this year, but I'll take it back to what we said before. If you've got a goal scorer in form, if you've got Andy Walker scoring 10 goals in 9 games, whatever, why don't you play your best man?
Right.
So for me, I think Kevin is the obvious choice, given that Willie done the Celtic game at the weekend there, Don done the Rangers game. David Dickinson, it's probably still just a little bit early for him. So Kevin was maybe the obvious one, given that next there. But I'm all for, if you're the best referee, you put the best man in for the toughest job. And
tell me this, Des, do you think there are some referees that have been promoted to Scottish Premiership games that are not up to it? I mean, I'm speaking to, and again, not giving you any names of coaches or managers, but I'm speaking to managers, let's say, of some of the lower end of the Scottish Premiership. They're getting referees that they feel are just not ready. And it's always been a bugbear of theirs. It's a small club, and you maybe get a referee who's got no experience and will give you this game in the Scottish Premiership. I know that you have to get experience somewhere, but do you think some of them are not up to it?
I wouldn't use the phrase that they're not up to it. I think you used it quite rightly, that they've got to gain experience somewhere, and it's like dripping in an under 18. I mean, we've seen at the weekend, Ross County played, was it a 16-year-old at centre half? They've got to be given that chance. However, I think they've got to be given the appropriate guidance prior to that and go through a learning phase. So they will have done championship games, they will have had hopefully a good mentoring process and have mentoring thereafter it. Where the difficulty comes is if they put them in too early and they've maybe not been up to scratch, they need to be pulled back out, given a bit more coaching, a wee bit more education. A football player and a referee is exactly the same. They've got to have the right approach and the right process. The difficulty is it's not a glamorous job, let's be honest. You're always going to be open to criticism, so the pool that they've got to work from at the Category 1 level is going to be smaller. And just to go back to I don't say they're not good enough. I would say they just need a little bit more appropriate coaching. Would that be fair? Yeah,
I think so. I totally accept that they need experience. We all need to get experience in whatever walk of life. But when I speak to some of the managers and coaches, they're feeling as though some of them have been promoted and they're not ready.
Yeah,
and it's maybe because VAR is requiring some of the senior refs to be operating at that level. And hang on a minute, we've not got enough numbers. Let's just promote these guys. And
it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. That's exactly what it is.
Exactly. Andy, good luck on Saturday. I hope everything goes smoothly for your broadcast at Celtic Park. And let's hope that Kevin Clancy makes a number of major errors so Des and I can talk about them next time.
Let's hope.
Very good. Good to speak to you, Des. Take care.
You too, Andy. Take care.
See you next time on Get Involved Referee.